In today's demo, I'm going to show you how you can convert a grid which looks like this, which is a very typical line of business scenario, into something which looks like this. And we achieve this with the use of column templates. And we have two kinds of column templates for the cell itself. So there is one column template for the display of the cell. And we have another column template which actually handles what it should look like when you're editing that particular cell. The grid by itself is pretty performant. It's one of the fastest grids we have out there, and it comes with a lot of the features already baked in. So for example, you have filtering, sorting, pinning. All of these features are very easy to enable on top of the grid. And the grid comes with some default templates. So for this particular grid, I actually have editing enabled. So when I actually select into any one of these cells here, so for example, for last name, when I double click it, it knows that it's actually a text input, and it creates a text input for us automatically. You don't actually have to do anything. Similarly, if you select something which is a date field, you would see the date editor, and this is also done automatically. But what we want to do is really change the look and feel in order to achieve this look and feel for a grid, which is sometimes required by the business to make your grid actually look nice and pretty. So on the basic grid, there are some capabilities which are also part of those column templates without actually having to enable or create these custom templates for your cells. So in this case, you can see the avatar URL pointing to a specific PNG for showing inside this grid. So the quickest way to say get imagery into your grid would be if I go back to the editor, and what you're seeing is the edit time experience for the grid. And for each of the grids, you can see that all the child elements for the grid are the columns. And I can select my avatar URL, and that actually displays the grid column properties. And here you have a display format. There is another option for an image. And if I select image, you can see that it automatically replaces it with the image. And if this is good for you, that's not a problem. You can just go ahead and move on. But if you want to customize it even more, it says that I do not want to show separate columns for last name, first name. Instead, I want to combine it with the avatar URL, which is similar to the scenario I was showing you earlier. Like in this templated version, I'm showing a nice little avatar. I'm controlling the size of it, and then I'm showing your first name and last name. I would like to have more control over it, which is why I'm going to create this basic grid. And I'm going to convert it into a display template so that I can customize this. The first order of business, there are some columns here which I really don't need. And in App Builder, all you have to do is select the column and hit your delete key, and they're gone. Same thing for address street, address city. These are things which I am going to create a custom template for, so I don't need it to occupy all the space on the grid. So I'm just getting rid of all of these things. Phone number, I'm going to keep intact. Now for this avatar URL, I can create a custom column, which is not bound to anything, and it's only there to represent the contents of the avatar, the last name, and the first name. So again, I don't need employee ID. So I'm going to select this avatar URL. I can reuse this column. That means it'll still be bound, or I can convert it to an unbound column just by zapping that data field connection in here. And in this column here, I'm just going to give it a custom name called employee. So in order to customize the contents of this column, we have introduced this new capability we're called custom templates. And there are three kinds. One is called a header template, another called cell display, another for cell edit. And these templates are what allows us to create customized layouts and content inside that particular column. So in our case, I want to show the avatar, the first name, and the last name. So what I need is just display. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable my cell display. And you can see there's a hint for drop content here. I can just go ahead and drag and drop from the toolbox an avatar component, but just this is faster for me. There is a shortcut. It's called the Control E or Command E, which gives me an in-context search box. And I can say, give me an avatar. And it adds an avatar in place. And then I need this last name and first name, they are both text elements. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue editing that cell display template. I'm going to add two text elements. And I'm going to set this thing to a certain size, not overline, a caption size. and I'm going to copy and paste it twice. And for the first text element, I can now bind it to first name. And for the second text element, I can bind it to last name. And for the avatar, as you can see, I can now choose from an icon, I can choose image, and that exposes the binding option for me. And in the binding option, this particular data source actually has that avatar URL. So I'm just going to plug in the avatar URL. And as you can see, it's starting to look very close to what we already have. Now, the only thing you need to pay attention to is by default, the template does not actually give you any layout directions. So in order for us to really control the layout, all we need to do is add our own layout inside it. And I can do that by I can just select these elements, and you can do this in any order. You can add a layout first and then start dropping components, or you can do it after the fact. I'm doing it after the fact. So I'm just going to right click, add layout, and say add it to a row layout. And now this gives us the default a flex container, which positions things as flex normally does. And in the vertical alignment, I'm just saying center it. And then I can also specify a gap property to space things out inside the flex container. So I'm going to give it like an 8-pixel gap. And for this image, I want it to be even farther away from the first name. What I can do is I can go into my margins here, and I can set a right margin of another 8 pixels, so just double the amount. And as you can see, now that I have created this layout, which is very similar to what I was showing you earlier, and I no longer need my last name and first name in my grid, and it's already looking very similar. So I can show you in the grid right now. I hit play, and you can see this is the basic grid which we just evolved, and this was the grid with template, which is exactly the same. The other quick thing I'm going to do in terms of binding is I just going to put a chip component instead of the phone number. So what I can go ahead and do, I can select my designer again. I'm going to select my address.phone and just call it phone number. Let it be, and I'm not removing the binding in this case, right? So I'm just going to call it phone number. And inside the column, I'm going to again edit. I'm going to change the cell display template. It goes blank because there's nothing in here. I'm going to just drop a chip component, and as you can see, the chip component already has some functionality in here. So I'm just going to look for a phone icon here. I can replace the phone icon. And for the actual content of the chip, which is right now just showing a default name called country, I can actually bind it now to phone number. And that's all it takes for us to get a nice looking chip inside the phone number. For the date field, I'm not going to bother with it because it already has a date editor created by default. But what I do want to do is change the title area, which is right now just showing a normal display template called cost accountant. But I want to be able to show a select box, for example, in there. So the process is the same. I select the title. This time I'm going to not bother with the display template. The display template can be as it is, but I want to enable the edit template because as you go into the edit mode for editing that particular column, I want to show a select box. So when I enable the edit template, you now see there are two adorners which show up on top of the cell. So I can switch between display and edit. As I said, I'm not touching the display template at all. I have not even enabled it. So you're seeing what the default looks like. In the edit template, I can go in here and I'm going to drop in a select, right? So I'm going to add a select box in here. So by default, it adds an input field. It has a label and placeholder, but in the context of the column, I actually don't need it. So I'm just going to remove it from here. And that gives me a nice little clean select box in here. And for the select itself, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the options here, and I'm going to repeat it based on data. And the data I'm going to use is from a data source, which is bound to the same grid. So it's Northwind employees. And for the content of that list, I'm going to bind it to, I believe it was title. Yes, it was title. And the value, I'm also going to bind it to title. And I'm going to go ahead and at this point, this thing is bound, but I also want to bind the value of the select to whatever it was there before. So for that, what I need to do is the value field here. I'm going to select it as cost account title again. And that's pretty much it. So now I have a display template which looks normal, and I have an edit template which actually has a select box, right? So now if I hit preview, now this is, again, remember, this is the basic grid. I just modified the employees column, and I modified the title column and the chip column. So for the title column, now if I go and double click to enter the edit mode, you'll see, voila, I have my select box in here. And there is one feature which we're still working on improving right now, is that right now if you make the selection in preview and you select away, you see it reverts to the previous value. This thing is not going to be a problem when you actually generate the app, but we are working on improving this particular feature as we go along. So now I've shown you how you can use display templates to create a nice little custom layout. I've shown you how you can modify the edit template to create a different component in there. So for example, I use select, but we'll be adding the support for a simple combo or a single select combo very soon. And that allows you to kind of create a very custom layout for all your grids, and makes it really pretty to actually experience the grid with all the same performance, but now with the benefit of templates. So as I mentioned, this behavior of it reverting back to the previous value is only a limitation in the App Builder preview. What I have here is a compiled demo. So I basically downloaded this application, and I ran this is running as an Angular application right now. So I compiled this application in order to show you how this would behave differently after you generate the code. And actually, the first thing you need to notice is that whatever I was showing you inside the preview of the App Builder is pretty much exactly what you see in the running application. So there is no basic difference other than a toolbar disappearing on the top, but it's the very same component. So in here, if I change the value to say accountant 3, it'll actually preserve the value, and you can see that it's not been committed yet. It's got that italic style applied to it. And this is just to show you that whatever limitation I was showing you inside the App Builder preview of it not preserving the value, it's no longer the case when you actually generate the app and actually use the application directly. And one final thing I want to point out in terms of the demo is that now that you've been creating all these templates in your grid, we also have an easy way for you to find out which columns have templates, which columns have display templates. And that's where the outline actually kicks in, is that when you look at the grid itself, all the columns which have an expander means that they have child elements. So in the case of the employee column, if I expand it, you will see that it's got a cell display template. And if I have the phone number, it also has a cell display template. But if I open what you call the title, if I expand title, it has a cell edit template. So you can actually have full control and not having to hunt and pick like which columns have which kind of feature. You can actually see it directly in the outline itself. And if you select it, it'll take you directly into that correct mode. So you do not actually have to use the design surface directly all the time. You can use the outline to get the same benefit. And that's a quick summary of what's possible with column templates in App Builder and the support which is rolling out very soon to you. So you should be able to play with it and let us know if you have any feedback about this particular feature. See ya.